and up.
All right, well, we'll see how it goes. I guess I can share my screen. We do have a few things on the agenda on the shared doc. So I'll just go there for right now. We'll see how it goes. So I wanted just to have a general discussion. We've just gotten a release out the door, which we'll hear about the status of all of that, I assume, in a minute. And we do know some specific things on the long or medium-term horizon, which we can get back to, but I wanted to kind of treat this as a bit of a reset and just to understand what our priorities are. And in light of what Timon just told us about pivot in plans as to how we do testing and build out QA facilities, what the priorities are for Aether in general. Just as an overview, we've been getting a pretty good turnout at this meeting, and I know everyone here has a stake in what's going on. There is a larger set of people out there that I talk to a fair amount. They tend to be a little bit more in the research direction, academics, but they want to build 5G edge deployments in their lab. And not necessarily for commercial purposes, but it's a valuable usage of Aether. And I want to at least incorporate their thinking and their concerns in what we talk about, and maybe over time get a few more of them showing up to this call, because there actually are a fair number of them out there. All right, so I got a number one bullet on the list just to introduce it, but let's come back to it towards the end as we get through the other items. And so let's just go through what's on here right now. And I don't know who entered each one of these, but let me just jump ahead because I want to hear, I assume, from Amal about the deployment, the release.
Hello, everyone. The deployment is smooth. There is any new problem that appears. Last week, from last meeting, I told that there was a problem regarding Atomics chart for Aether 2.0 release deployment testing, but it has been resolved from the yesterday. So as of now, there is no problem regarding the Aether deployment release test. Regarding the upper point, so can I cover all, Larry? Or
well, I just want to make sure we close on that one just for a second. So okay. Are we officially, I mean, we pulled back and we decided to support Aether in a box as our release. And you're talking about 2.1 and 2.0 testing. Is that now the limit? We're no longer claiming any of the earlier versions?
Currently, we are only deployment, in case of deployment test, we are only testing 2.0 and 2.1.
Okay.
And master version.
Yeah. Okay. All right, go ahead. So jump back up to the other item. Oh, I'm sorry, does anyone else have anything they want to say about that or comments?
Yeah, one question, like Amol, you mentioned the Atomics issue was resolved yesterday. What was that issue?
Actually, there was index problem. Aether 2.0 release uses the Atomics Raft as well as Atomics controller. So the indexing of those chart was messed up. I think Jordan made some changes which messed up the index. So so whenever we deploy Aether 2.0, we pull those charts from his repository, means Atomics public repository, but it was not able to pull. You can see similar problems on the Slack also. People were facing the same problem. But it has been resolved from the day before yesterday. I think he might have fixed the indexing issue.
Okay.
Thank you.
Sorry, Amit, does that address the problem we've been seeing?
No, that is a different problem that we will discuss separately.
Anything else? Okay, back up the previous item.
So if you can you click Larry on the link OMEC project SMF? So I had little bit of confusion. So I want to ask, can you go down? Can you please go down? So if you see those integration tests that we do on any pull request, you can see that there are multiple jobs set on this repository which are identical. For example, license verification means Aether Junkin is doing license verification, as well as GitHub also checking the license verification. So these are we are making the same functionality twice. So I don't know what is the motivation behind this.
There's no motivation. It's a historical artifact.
No, I can just add it to it that when the servers for Ether were not when we were moving it to the Colo site and stuff, we didn't have this testing happening and stuff. So there was a work item to add these tests through a GitHub action so that it doesn't depend on a Jenkins server, and that's why we added it. And in that we added all this unit test, linting, license check, and building it also. So we can continue to use the GitHub actions, or we can continue using Jenkins, whichever way suits. I mean, both ways work.
So my suggestion is, means you guys should tell me if you want to use GitHub actions, we can continue, because in both the cases we are paying for it. Means for Aether Junkin, we are paying AWS to launch the virtual machine and testing it. And in GitHub actions, if we cross certain number of minutes, we will be paying it. So both the ways are.
Isn't it the case? My recollection is that we kind of ventured into the GitHub checks, but predominantly we're doing Jenkins testing, and that we should probably, if someone correct me if I'm wrong about that, but I would think that we would just standardize around that if we needed to make a decision.
But as of now, I don't see like that Ether in a box test kind of integrated into Jenkins yet. I mean, if that's also going inside Jenkins for every pull request that we do, then we can integrate all this, remove this GitHub actions, and put the rest of it like linting and everything into Jenkins itself.
So can you elaborate more on this question? What do you mean by AIB testing?
See, this is SD core testing, right? OMEC testing.
Yeah, this is SD Core's one of the repository of SD Core.
Yeah.
So currently, Aether in a box, if you are talking about that repository is hosted by Gerrit, and we have all the Jenkins tests running on that repository.
Right. So that's for if you do changes on Ether in a box repo, right?
Correct.
But Ether in a box repo has code from this various SD Core components like AMF,
Correct.
SMF, and all.
Correct.
This. Now, when we make changes into this code, our way of verification is to run Ether in a box. So if we can add a Jenkins job to these repos, then it becomes like after every pull request, whenever we raise a pull request, it goes and tests AIB and says, okay, the tests are passing and it didn't break anything that we added. That would be kind of make it more stable and stuff. So.
I understand what you're talking about. So let me get back to you how we can achieve that. I understand that these are the subcomponents of the Aether in a box, and you want to deploy that in an Aether in a box and test it whether it is going to work or not. So let me explore that thing, and I will get back to you on this.
Sure, no problem.
But the question is, are we going to continue GitHub or Jenkins?
We can move
everything to then we have
Jenkins.
To stop. If Jenkins, then we have to stop GitHub actions.
Yeah. I mean, if you have, I mean, that's a question. I don't know. Do we have all the AWS resources to run for these various repos whenever we add code to it? Then sure. I mean, that would be better and more stable because we are, we handle all of it and we don't depend on GitHub itself. Then I would also prefer to put it on Jenkins.
So Amol, you said like we have to pay for GitHub action.
Yes. So GitHub action actually provides. We have a free account. So free account provides the computation time of 300 minutes per month. So if we cross those 300 minutes, then the bill starts, means
Got
those
it.
only 300 minutes we get free
So
to use.
is
And
that
this is,
some recent policy change? Because I remember like other repositories like UPF
yeah,
and other, they were using it exhaustively.
yeah. So for example, pins, they always exhaust it. But ONF is not responsible, I think, for the paying for pins.
Now, what happens if we like it's like in those actions doesn't run at all, or they
No,
get
no,
stuck?
they will run, but
So
it will build.
ultimately, obviously, we want to reduce costs, and
Yeah.
duplicating is not in our best interest. But I think just in general, from the health of the project and everyone being able to understand what's going on, if we unified around Jenkins testing, and it was always, in my view, a kind of a one-off when people wanted to go do something in GitHub.
So
Pen was sort of use case number one
getting
for
with.
that.
So yeah, right. Yeah, I understand that the cost needs to be reduced and unifying it. But the advantage, whatever we were getting with the GitHub action, was that it was very easy to add any action. There is plenty of support available online to see how a specific action can be added. Versus if this has to be done in the Jenkins, it comes with the cost of somebody doing those changes in the Jenkins scripts, which
Yes,
is probably
you're
comes on the
Also,
ONF infra.
do GitHub Actions also allow the community to contribute to the main line a little easier?
Yeah, right. So Jenkins becomes little bit of ONF's own repository, which is not available to other people.
Yeah, I agree with that, but I actually think that's part of our problem now is ONF, which is now a very small team, tends to own that Jenkins problem, and it's not a community-owned thing, and it ought to be. Now, that's not to say that the GitOps goes to zero. I mean, it may very well make sense and cost us practically no compute time to do a license check, for example.
Mhm.
But the second I've basically stated my opinion there.
Okay. So Badri, I have a question. For example, if you merge any, obviously this is not a merge, right? So if you merge anything, so automatically the artifacts will be generated, and those artifacts will be used in the updated artifacts will be used in the Helm charts, and the Helm charts will be used for the Aether latest deployment, right?
And that's why we tend to use Garrett instead of GitHub.
Right. I mean, not from here.
You just opened an entire can of worms as to how. I mean, you pull on any one of these threads and it'll unravel.
Agree. Just to answer Amol, your point is that it wouldn't do it from here, but that's the testing that we want to do right now. In AIB, we can go and change the image tag. Once whatever is PR is generated, will compile image tag is generated, that gets replaced in AIB values file, and then AIB runs the test. So that then it runs with the latest image that has been generated with this new code. That's the idea. I mean, after that, anyways, you have to do the whole Helm chart process and release process.
Yeah. So after merge, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think that deployment is already there. So let's talk offline on that. I understand what you want to do. Thank you. Thank you for raising those points.
Let me go back to where we were. Rock test?
Yes. So this question is for the Sean. Hello, Sean. So there are a couple of API and GUIs tests that we run for the older version like Aether 1.5 and all. So do we still need to run those old tests, or we can just disable it?
Yeah, well, definitely the 3.0 and 4.0. Even for the 2.0, really, I think you'd have to be running them on a branch now. We changed some of the test infrastructure. It wasn't possible to make it completely version agnostic. So it would, are you seeing failures on 2.0?
No, means in general, I was asking because those are little bit old and we are not no longer required. So if it is no longer required, then I can disable it just to reduce the AWS cost.
Yeah, well, okay, what I would say is that the 2.0 API still exists in Ether 2.1.
Okay.
Because of backwards compatibility and the ability to migrate. So I think the 2.0, yes, but not 3.0 or 4.0.
Okay, I understand. Thank you, Sean.
Yeah, just for some context, 3 and 4 came before 2. We reset the numbering. Also, the GUI, we don't have GUI tests for 2.1.
Yes, right.
You might as well keep the GUI tests running for 2.0. That is still possible to use with Ether 2.1.
API version 3?
No, I mean GUI 2.0.
Okay.
Or maybe there is the next line. You have GUI, but is there no GUI 2.0?
I need to verify. There might be possibility that there is no GUI 2.0.
Seems strange. But yeah, 3.0 and 4.0 are of no use at this stage.
Okay, sure. I'll disable all those jobs and see about the 2.0 GUI job. And if it is not there, then probably I will set it up. If there will be any problem, then I will let you know.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Sean.
Atomics dependencies, whose item is that?
That is again my item. So my question is to the TST member is like most of the repositories are depend on atomics, and if there is any problem, then it takes a lot of time to make it correct. So is there anything unique that atomics offer that we want to use, or we can directly jump to another key value store?
It's the dependency's pretty strong, and it's not the key value store per se, it's the API as I understand it. I mean, it's a good point to raise, but the dependencies are high. Sean, is that a fair statement?
Yeah, it is, Larry. Yeah, it is.
So
now, one of the points that Jordan made lately is that there are multiple backends that Atomics supports. I wonder if choosing a backend other than the Raft backend would offer us any advantage. Do you have any thoughts on that, Sean?
To me, there's two sides to Atomics. There's the whole deployment side with all of the custom resource definitions and all the smarts there. And really, that's one of the places we've had, a lot of problems. I also agree on the storage side. We've also had some problems, and actually, Amit actually found. Well, we actually solved one of those this week, and I know Amit probably has an update on that as well. So I don't really see the backend store being a problem itself. I think I suppose the installation or instantiation is also a problem. But because there are such heavy dependencies on it, I mean, we use it both for onus config and onus topo. And I know is it SD-RAN also uses it a bit. I think it's probably more of an effort than anyone is willing to put in to migrate those applications away from Atomics.
So with respect to Aether, if like ROC uses only 3 ONOS topo, ONOS config, and ONOS CLI. So is there any possibility that only if we make those changes with respect to Aether deployment, will it be possible? Because I don't know the possibility, because I don't have much architectural view that what will break if anything will change on those 3 libraries.
Yeah, so I think there's probably not any kind of well-defined interface where you can swap out atomics for, say, Postgres or some other storage mechanism, or indeed where you can swap atomics out for etcd or something like that. And it's not something that you can simply have a choice of, well, for this deployment I'll use atomics, for that deployment I'll use something else. It's really not that simple at all. The APIs are embedded into it in a very intricate way, and it really would take a lot of work to change it.
It's more than an API. I put it down as an API. It's really a runtime system. There's just more. It's thick. I see Dan's got his hand up.
Yeah, I just wanted to chime in on this from somebody who, we're trying to commercialize this thing, and we run into quite a few issues with the Atomics database, and mostly around the ability to be able to push decent sized configs in. And in a commercialized deployment, I would ask, could we explore as a group what it would take to use a given data store that is supported, say, in a cloud implementation or something like that.
So are you thinking, have you got something in mind then? I mean,
well, I don't have the solution in mind. I just have the problem statement of, as we're starting to deploy this stuff out, it's not cloud native, right? So if we could have a discussion around what it would take to maybe make that data store for configs something that's a little more agnostic and not so heavily embedded, would that give us the atomics to deploy this in clouds more natively, et cetera?
Yeah.
So,
I mean, in a way, like Atomics is very cloud native. It's really totally integrated into Kubernetes, but I would say probably in a way that's more complex than most people would want. And I think, from what you're saying, what you want is something that's going to have high performance and, simplicity, and that you can choose between providers of some well-established data storage system. I think from my own point of view, something like Postgres or MySQL or something like that probably would be a valid choice for it. But it's really it would take quite a bit of work to change it to something like that. And
so just trying to bring a little history in here. Atomics has been part of ONOS for a long, long time. And in fact, it was part of the ONOS deployment of SD Fabric / Trellis that was deployed commercially inside of Comcast, supporting a scalable number of routes, which is what it had to worry about at the time. So I think it's the case, and please correct me if I'm wrong, that this is not scale in terms of scale of the database, it's the scale of the configurations that are the size of the configurations that are written to the database, which may be different in a config setting than it was in a control setting.
Yeah, I think that's a very good way of stating the problem, Larry.
Okay.
yeah.
So in my view, that's not an Atomics problem. That is although maybe it's a mismatch by using Atomics. It is what is that? It's a very high level decision that's been made about dropping complete configs in as opposed to incrementally changing. I mean, if you've got resilient database, you should be able to read and write to it without worrying about having to, reestablish all of the state in one big lump. So maybe this is consistent with what Sean was just saying about looking at an SQL database. Maybe writing gigantic records to an SQL database works better. I mean, does it come down to that?
Well, yeah, all major data stores support large blobs, right? I mean, you can do that.
So, I mean, calling it's a weird situation. We want our database to scale because we have one item we want to write to it. It's just a really large item.
Yeah, I mean, really, like honest config is like a model-driven storage system, and everything has been in it. Everything that's stored is really boiled down to like a generic schema. So really, if you take something like an SQL database, really you'd have one big table, and you would have probably 3 columns. One is device, the next is path, and the next is value. So that's kind of re-architecting the idea altogether. Atomics doesn't store things like that today. It's storing a blob, and really it's unsuitable to store a blob. And Jordan came up with this patch there a few weeks ago, 1606, where it stored each path value individually, but straight away we saw the performance go down. Now, I take your point, Larry, that like in the ONUS Classic, I mean, there were hundreds of thousands of flows in active use with Atomics in a distributed system. And I remember the performance figures from Comcast, like they were very impressive. I think it went up to like 700,000 flows or something like this. And really, I can't see why we're having the Atomics performance problems that we are. If the system is that performance, it seems like there's something misconfigured in it or something like this.
So it's not so I think what I come back to is it's not the store, it's the model that we have of what it is we want to store. And maybe when you're storing state, a modest amount of state for a large number of devices, it's different than storing config state for a service. That's one possible mismatch.
Yeah.
No, it seems to me that what came down was Jordan's new approach with this new patch seemed like a move in the right direction. Get rid of pushing the monolithic configs and start using the map abstraction. But we haven't had the resources, to follow through with why that didn't work. And I mean, it's not sufficient, to propose a change like this, put it out there thinking it might work, but then, not actually be able to test it and fix whatever problem is, because maybe it's a simple problem that we just need to get to the bottom of. It seems like these are recurring things coming up. I'm not sure how we get past that. We just can't we can't seem to close the loop on it somehow.
Yeah. So we covered this in the ROC to SD Fabric meeting last week, and Jordan, said that what it needs is caches in the client, and basically that's something he's going to try to implement. Now, I don't know why there wasn't a cache in the client prior to that, or how Honest Classic worked without having a cache in the client. I think, like Larry said, it's a different operating model, and like you say, Scott, it feels like we're always trying to close the loop on it. It's something that has been going on quite a long time now.
So the ROC meeting is active. Jordan is attending it.
Yeah.
Jordan is hearing the issues surrounding it. So it gives me a little bit of comfort that you folks are, maybe you haven't gotten to it entirely solved yet, but it is something that you're paying attention to. Is that a fair statement?
Yeah. For a long time, Larry, we had difficulty getting access to resources. And in the past few weeks, there has been a lot of focus put on rock in the Fabric project, and there are 3 people working on it at present to solve some of those scalability issues, including the atomics ones. So yeah, we are tackling it.
So I'm all for considering other options. In fact, if I may do another small history lesson, Rock used to use I forget if it was Postgres or MySQL or what the database was. It used to use a different backing store. It was a different structure. It didn't use ONOS config. So I'm completely sympathetic to there are other ways of doing this.
But you're talking essentially about
what's that?
You're talking essentially about XOS. Though,
Yeah,
Larry,
Rock's predecessor
did
this a little bit differently. So we know the other way also is viable. But it's changing this horse right now is we shouldn't slam the door on it, but it's a big step, and I'm a little bit optimistic that Intel is now putting resources into it and understands the issue. So I don't know.
Yeah, I worry that if you pull at one thread here, the atomics thread, that you end up unraveling it all, and you have to build a new rock from scratch. Because if you take away atomics, you take away ONOS config, you've lost the API layer, you've lost the model. I mean, it's just all gone at that point, and it's like clean slate. You could consider going back to XOS if you wanted to do that, or engineering XOS 2.0 if you wanted to do that. It's that major of a redesign, and it would require considerable engineering resources to do that.
Yeah, but I mean, anyone in the open source community is free to start their own ONOS config and their own rock if they want, if they think they can do like a better job of implementing it. I mean, we have to work with what we have. And, I don't know if anyone's talking about throwing out the baby with the bathwater. I mean, really the question was just about separating separating ONOS config and atomics. Just that alone, that was my understanding of it.
Yeah, but I just don't see how you do that and then preserve ONOS config.
Yeah, well, I think you'd have a long uphill battle even to put across the value in spending money doing that.
Yeah, that's what I mean. If you start down that path, there's a lot of re-implementation.
Yeah, but there's even a lot of agreements to be got. There's a lot of architecture.
So Dan, do you see a parallel path that we have some resources for, or?
Yeah, I don't know. Unfortunately, I'll tell you that my team doesn't have the experience with atomics to be able to solve this problem with atomics and ONOS config. So that's where I'm at a disadvantage. If I did, I would contribute some time to just go solve this problem ourselves and contribute that.
Well, so that would be great. But the flip side is you do have experience with something else that could be substituted. Although we've just been kind of talking about, yanking on the thread problem. Is that possibility for you?
We can explore that. Yeah.
I think it's worth exploring.
That does to Scott's point of, then now are we managing 2 completely different code bases? The whole point is to merge this eventually, right?
Yeah. I mean, this is the challenge of a situation like this. Either you carry two parallel paths for a while and coalesce on one, or double down, I guess.
So another option is, to try to build expertise in atomics, beyond that which we have at Intel. Is there, and I mean, ONF would have to have resources, or Khajiit would have to have resources, or just someone who can start building atomics knowledge so that we have, some partners who are not Intel people who know something about atomics. I mean, I think that's part of the problem, is that this is just solely internal knowledge with us. And, you guys don't have access to it, and you're solely reliant that you have to come to us for help. So what would it take for you to be able to learn enough to be more self-sufficient, if I can put it that way?
That's a very good question. I think we should explore that.
So with that respect, my means I was thinking in the same way. But if you see the Aether stack, right? One side we have SD Core, who is using MongoDB. Another side we have Rock, who is using Atomics. So in the same deployment, we have two stores running parallelly, two different components, and each SD-Rock runs 3 replicas of MongoDB. Here, Atomics run 3 replicas of Atomics. Sorry, Rock runs 3 replicas of Atomics.
Yeah,
So,
and if you threw SD Fabric and SD RAN in there, you would have multiply that by 3 or something.
yeah. So
I mean, that's where you end up with a microservice based approach. I don't think you can optimize that in a way.
I think Amol's point was like, I'm guessing, this is what I feel like. SD Core has its backing store. Rock is something like it has a backing store, but the issues we are seeing are very basic, right? We can assume an application which is having a database, normal database, and it should work properly, and that's what we have seen in the different applications. But with the Rock, with the Atomics, ONAS config, we are facing a lot of stability issues. Like we haven't reached the scalability factor, right? And each day we are getting different issues altogether. So for simple use case, so if we can maybe harmonize the storage, or maybe which storage is basically good, we can just replace it back, right? I think that was the point.
Yeah, I mean, it's a valid point, but it's the engineering overhead of doing that is substantial. And again, it's not MongoDB versus whatever the database part.
Not MongoDB, but it's like what I am assuming, like Rock has a backing database. So the issues what we are seeing are very basic thing. Like we are not reaching the scalability factor, which we were testing it earlier with the older Atomics version, and now we are seeing very unstable things.
So my point was, if like what we saw in the presentation of Purdue University, Larry, in the Aether community meeting, that they were also thinking like a stateless component of the 5G, right? So currently the situation is one component running its own database, another component is running its own database. So if we make it like a centralized one database for all the components, then that will help in the scalability of the stateless other component of the 5G. Means,
well,
like,
so let me just see if I understand what you're saying. So if we were Amazon and we were doing this, we would have the obvious key value store. What is it, Dynamo or whatever it is, and everybody going off and building their SD cores and their SD RANs and their rocks would be using the same store. I mean, that's if we were in that situation. I mean, is that? If you could dictate that across to all components, that would be mean, one could just as well argue, why didn't SD Core use atomics? It was already there being used by all the other ONF projects. Now, I'm not saying that they made a mistake by using MongoDB. I'm just saying that these projects evolve independently and have their own communities and decision-making processes. We are now at Aether involved in integrating them all together. So that's going to happen in any project that spans multiple sub projects. I think, I'm sorry, it's just, this seems like an idealized situation that I don't, if we could start over clean slate, we might do it that way, but I don't see how we get there from here with everything else that people are struggling with.
Yes, with resource limitation.
Yeah.
You're absolutely right.
So Larry, what Khajiit will commit to is to go off and see if there's, enough. If we have the ability to even explore for the pieces that aren't working for us, developing a different data store and what expertise gap we might have to get down that road.
Yeah. I think there's two possibilities, that one, and then what would it take to build some expertise in atomics?
Well, that one's, if that fails, then we've got to go back to that one.
Then you can fall back to that one. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of think myself that I think Zach said it on this call previously. One of the problems with atomics is the small user base, as in we're the only people using it, and hence, we see the problems first. Whereas if you do have an alternate data store, other people are fixing the problems, and you have a community, you can ask a question. But the user base of atomics is very small, and I think that's one of the problems here. But with atomics, I think, Dan, if you are looking into it, make no mistake, you need to have somebody that understands distributed data stores, and that's really the crux of it. And that's really the question for honest config is a distributed data store required? Like atomics has amazing resiliency and availability. It can lose a node without losing any data. It implements the raft algorithm and all of those kind of things. And that's really one of the questions here is that level of resiliency needed? And what would you do with an alternative technology that didn't have that high availability? How would you cope with crashes, and how would you cope with all the other kind of functional needs that you have? And I'm not saying they're impossible, it's just they're the things to consider.
Yeah. I know I'm kidding here, but I mean, I'm sure those resources are on every street corner, right? But we'll see what we can find.
Maybe these days.
So one thing that I would like to see happen is a direct line of communication, if we could, between Amit and Dan with Jordan. We need, we're going through multiple, Son, you're doing a great job connecting the sides here, but it might be helpful. Recreating bugs. We're hearing about scalability problems, and I know you raised, Sean, you raised the point last week about reproducing those. So the tighter we can make this loop, the more progress we can make.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Well, there's
I don't know how that is done, Larry. With the internals of Intel.
Here's how it's done. I'm sorry. We get Dan and Amit to join the ROC call. They're users of ROC.
Well, that's an internal Intel only.
Oh, that's now internal. I get it on my calendar, so I didn't realize. I hadn't gone to it in a long time.
Oh, yeah, this is ST Fabric ROC call. I don't know if you're on that one, Larry. There may be
okay. I'm sorry. I was confused because I still get the old ROC calendar messages, and that's not the same one.
No.
Is that
Yeah,
call still happening, Larry?
No, that would be Scott. Scott was running that, and I'm sorry, Scott, is that still happening?
No, well, we have, we've rebranded ourselves a couple times, and I'm not calling my team the Rock team. I mean, a subset of what I do is Rock. So, Rock discussion does happen, and, Rock bugs are resolved, new Rock features are added. There's limits on how much I can say publicly on what we're working on.
Okay, so this, long story short, this is the public open source meeting where the 2 points connect.
Yeah, but I think, to your point, what would facilitate is, this is a relatively high level meeting we're having here. If we could have some kind of a lower level technical meeting among just the technical people, Jordan, maybe Sean, and maybe, some people from Dan's team, that could make progress quicker. But Sean and I don't know if we know how to set up that pipeline. Maybe we just need to discuss it internally and figure out, because I know other people do this. We when we were at ONF, we had Intel people collaborating with us back when we were on the outside. So certainly there's ways to do it. We need to figure out, how we can do that.
Yeah.
I would like to be part of that team so that I will get exposure about the atomics.
Well, I mean, so ONF is the obvious neutral broker to call this meeting. And Amal, you can maybe run with that and help set it up.
Yeah, if
Okay.
you guys could call the meeting and we could get Jordan invited to it, maybe that is the way that one goes about doing this. Internally, Sean and I, we cannot give away Jordan's time. We probably have to go through management channels to make sure. I mean, Sean knows more about this than I, because he's been more closely working with that team, but we probably need to get, some permission for Jordan to do this, for him to, work on what could be perceived as an outside task. Basically, we probably have to run it by Sarov or someone like Sarov.
Well, let's give it a try. I mean, making efficient use of this time, we can maybe not rehash the same things every time and get right down to brass tacks on it. And that might be the best we can do. But if we could convene another meeting, it would probably be helpful.
Yeah, and a low level technical focused one. I think this benefits us and you. It's just a matter of getting it done.
You know what? The other thing is even short of meetings, if there were a focused Slack channel, perhaps on the ONF community page that was Rock internals or something. I don't want it necessarily. It wouldn't be fruitful if it were open to 1,000 of people at this point, but as a place to convene, share information.
Yeah, we can look into that. We are so focused around using Teams these days that we don't. A lot of us don't visit Slack like we used to.
All right, never mind. That's not going to work.
I mean, we can consider it.
We're in the same boat, by the way, Scott, but we'll accommodate whatever needs to be done.
Yeah. I'll bring it up, with someone like Sarov.
So Dan,
things are just quite busy right now, so it's hard to get time to bring things like this up, but I'll see if I can get it brought up.
Dan, what would be easiest for you?
Either way, doesn't matter. I think an actual in-person meeting would probably be more productive, be more two-way and active.
Yeah.
But if there's not bandwidth for that, then a Slack channel or a Teams channel is perfectly fine as well.
All right. Good. We have to make progress on all of this. We're near the top of the hour, so let's just go on to the last bullet here. Is that you again, Amal?
Yeah. So that bullet actually regarding the SD fabric. but I just received a mail that there was a connection, so that node has been supported because I was not getting any reply from the mail. So here means only in this call I can communicate with the Intel people. That's why I included that point. So
All right.
no worries.
All right. Well, we are pretty much out of time and we didn't really get to have this discussion. So I'm just going to put one little piece of information on the table. I mentioned when we started, I'm back up at the top of the agenda here, that I'm going to stop sharing because I want to point you at a URL. Just a second. Yeah. So I've been starting a conversation with people who have tried to use Aether and have stubbed their toe pretty badly in different ways. And I'm trying to figure out how to help them start with something that's pretty straightforward, like Aether in a box, but eventually at Aether in a box, you get to a point that it was a perfectly good environment for developers to build, their subsystem and test it and commit it. But it didn't take you quite all the way to having something that you could run in a lab 24/7. And it certainly didn't get you to the point that you could scale it up. Now, maybe only scaling up only becomes an issue if you're a commercial consumer and you've got the resources to do that because it's now your business. But you ought to be able to scale a little further than we are today. Long story short, I've been floating an idea, which I've called on-ramp, which right now is just me familiarizing myself with Aether in a box and trying to bring it up to speed. But I kind of see a path forward that I'll just put out there. For now, this is my pet project. I don't know if it becomes an Aether initiative or not, of trying to prioritize the steps it takes to go from Aether in a box to something that you could run 24/7, even if it's at a smaller scale, like only a single site. Take a look at that and maybe we can talk about it a little bit more next time and see if there's interest in. What I'm going to try to do is to pull in some folks that have expressed an interest in this kind of thing and maybe get a little bit more involvement in the TST from those people. Some of them have made pretty good progress and I'm hoping they will contribute back. Having said that, are there any thoughts on this notion? Scott, I know you had looked at it a little bit before. Does this seem like a
Yeah. I think the incremental approach is the right way to go. We had very good luck with lightweight, Ether in a box with real radios deployments. So, I think, we talked about this briefly, and I really do feel this is absolutely the right way to go to get started. The challenge is how to, build upon it to add the additional functionality that people want to, to really encourage people to get their stuff adopted rapidly rather than, the pipeline to adoption is slow and people get discouraged, and to be able to increase the collaboration. So I think there's a lot of challenges, but I think maybe this is like the right way to go forward.
Let me throw out one other little bit here. Just a second. Some of you know that I've worked with, like Scott, in another situation on a number of books, but we've got a draft of one now on basically Aether. It's basically private 5G, and this is the help people understand what's going on, and then they very naturally want to jump into the code a little bit and then help them on-ramp. So this is part of that on-ramp process. We did this with the SDN work and included all the tutorials that the SD Fabric folks had put together. And there's a lot of people that use that, and it's how they come up to speed. It's a slightly different scenario, but I think these two things have an opportunity to go hand in hand a little bit. At least that's part of my own personal interest. I wanted to include that link because everyone in this call understands Ether, and you might want to take a look at that and then tell me what's wrong with it and how it can be fixed and improvements or new other material that ought to be there. Yeah, that's a good point. I'm just seeing oh, Dan, that was a direct message. It might be time to get people together in person. I think that's a really good point. There's a lot of history that we're unraveling now. Anything else?
I had some points to bring up for the Pronto demo setup, but I'm not sure if you're out of time. I just need a quick point out that for the demo setup, do we have the Ether central plane, control plane still running and managing all the different edges?
Not that I know at ONF. I mean, the only Ether edges are the Pronto ones right now, as far as I know.
Yeah, and the Pronto Central is running like it used to on the cloud somewhere, or is it that's stopped and every edge is using their own?
I have no idea. That is anyone else at ONF? I assumed that got sucked into Intel.
Pronto Central is now running on Intel cloud resources. I don't know what is the status of the old ONF cloud resources that we used to use for maintaining Pronto and Ether, but we're not using them anymore for Pronto.
But since we're running it on Intel resources, but it still manages the different edges that we have, like Stanford and whatnot, Princeton and stuff.
Yes, everything has been migrated to the Intel core.
Right, and like to upgrade that, do we have who is responsible for that? Is it ONF, Intel? Like for the demo part, we need to upgrade SD core on it to get the new features in.
Yeah, you and I can talk about that, Badri.
Okay, sure. All right.
Yeah, ONF is large, almost 100% disconnected from Pronto now.
Okay.
I mean, we still have some QA stuff going on at systems, and you're pulling it out of our repositories, but everything else is on your deployment.
Okay, thank you.
All right, looks like we're losing folks anyway, so see you again next week.
Well.
Bye.
Bye.